Do we have any indication that the other trustees can't make it?
No.
I have not heard.
Okay. So it's just Arthur and Kathy, right? Okay. Well, I will call this committee of the whole to order at 6:32. And let's see, Trustee Bachhorst, Trustee Baldoff, Trustee Ondorfer, Trustee Warren, President McCaig are all present.
And Trustee Stokerbrand just came on.
Awesome. Trustee Stokebrand is here. And we are awaiting Trustee Ursink. I'm sure he'll be here momentarily. We are gathered here this evening. Do I have to ask if this has been noticed?
The meeting has been posted and noticed according to law.
Great. So we're gathering tonight to discuss timing of the North Oakland Avenue pavement replacement project. And to introduce that item to us this evening is Director Bushlick. You got to help me, Leanne. I have not said your name very often.
That's all right. Am I introducing this?
You know what? I would be happy to get us started, and then I would welcome participation from both Leanne and Mark as we talk about individual areas that would be more apt to our expertise. So all things talking concrete, we can direct to Leanne. All things talking finance, we'll direct to Mark. But let's start with just a broad overview for a couple minutes to kind of ramp up how we got to this point. In 2015, the village.
Yep. And we do have a memo in the packet, right? So that is very detailed. So please follow along. Okay, now take it.
And I'll be brief because I'm presuming that most people have read through it. But key points for those people who want to get caught up. In 2015, the village commissioned a pedestrian and bicycle master plan to be created. And in that plan specified improvements and concepts to be applied to Oakland Avenue. Fast forward, the village undertakes a transportation and parking analysis. One half of that plan is dedicated towards transportation and improvements regarding transportation. Specifically, we asked a number of questions relative to North Oakland Avenue. So within that report, there are outlined recommendations that consultants have provided. So we have these tool planning tools that now came to the forefront. And last year, as the board sat down in the long range financial planning process, the board had a request to modify our long-term planning and capital needs to accommodate for the resurfacing and reconstruction of repavement of North Oakland and South Oakland Avenue. And so at that point, the concern became how to logistically accomplish that request within the timeline and specified years available we would have so that we wouldn't be conflicting with other projects as we proceeded in future years. So that is a reason why you see South Oakland Avenue going through a mill and overlay this year in 2021. And then next year in 2022, it was forecasted that we would go back and do a pavement replacement of North Oakland Avenue, which would essentially be replacing the pavement from curb to curb and dealing with the underground infrastructure, such as water and sewer and improvements that needed to be made, because that infrastructure is extremely old and is in need of replacement. So at the time, we had to acknowledge that typically, as we've all learned through the long range planning process, we design one year, we construct the following year. We had to kind of switch out some projects to design in an expedient time frame. But one of which we had a lot of data and recommendations already playing into because of some of the planning and documentation tools that we had in front of us. So that brings us to where we are today. We got to this point, and as we worked through some of the project logistics, we sat back and said, nobody had envisioned what COVID was going to do to the economy, how long it was going to last, how long we'd be in this certain type of dynamic. And so we wanted to come back and check. Can you hear me now? Okay. To see if this is how the board desired to proceed or if you wanted to consider an alternative. So we had to go back and take a look at the project schedule. The pavement replacement for North Oakland Avenue is being paid for out of TID 5, which is anticipated to close in the near future. So our forecast for construction would need to be accomplished within the near future and designated within those planning documents. When we get beyond the year 2025, that becomes questionable, as if we can correlate it to be within a reasonable closing of that TID. 2025 is a year of which we currently had scheduled a double alley replacement. So what we would be doing is actually taking that double alley replacement, moving it up to 2025, and then pushing back North Oakland pavement replacement to 2025 instead of next year, if that was the desire of the board. And the motivation here is primarily that our business community has gone through an incredibly challenging last year. And, you know, pavement replacement projects, no matter when they occur, they will always be challenging. So this does not take any way away from any of the challenges that will occur in 2025, but it is an 8-month period of reconstruction, of which we anticipate at various times, the majority of the roadway only being accessible for two-way traffic, and then having closed down both sides of the road for parking on street to accommodate that free flow traffic. We would not be able to have parklets, outdoor seating, because it would be an active construction zone, whether that be for the underground improvements and then following with road construction or vice versa. So these are some of the considerations that we're bringing forth tonight. And then if you did want to consider moving the project back, primarily just to accommodate for some additional time frame of which the business district could get back on their feet, we could do so, but then that would shift it until 2025, and then we would talk about what our options would be for financial considerations, which are outlined in the packet. So before we go forward to talk about financial options, if we do move this project back, I want to check in to see if there's any questions.
So,
Wesley.
so I guess my question would just be, you know, then Steph's on the line. So is this a request? Are we acting proactively here in terms of, you know, we think this is going to be a problem, therefore we want to put it in front of the board? Or is this something that's come through the bid and the bid director as a problem? And I'm not arguing with the fact that it does create an issue, but I'm just kind of curious as to where the genesis of this request is coming from.
It actually came proactively. So we reached out to the bid following to kind of make them apprised that we were going to be having this discussion, and said, you know, sit in on the call so that you can provide the perspective of the business district. But was something that was generated in consultation with President McCaig and Trustee Ursing.
Got it. And can I ask one more question? Maybe this is more for Leanne. I mean, I am assuming that based on this being put in front of us, that we can make North Oakland last till 2025. It's in pretty rough shape, and that was one of the reasons that I supported moving it up. But I'm assuming that there are kind of interim steps we can take between now and 2025 to keep it roadworthy, if that's the right word.
It will definitely take some efforts and probably some small investment of operating funds or diversion of funds related to large area pavement replacements that we typically budget every year. But yes, I mean, we can certainly stretch it to that point. I think the larger consideration this evening is the community impact on the construction schedule.
Thank you.
Trustee Ursing.
Yeah, I see Nat is on the call. I don't know if we can talk to the community right now, but I'd really love to get his perspective as being a bid member and, you know, somebody that utilizes parklets. Is it appropriate for me to bring him into the conversation at this point, Becca? Sorry, Anne.
I'll defer to President McKay.
Let's see if there are any technical questions from the board of Rebecca or Leanne, and then I'm really excited to open it up to public comment.
Okay, don't hear any more technical. I'll turn it back over to you.
Nat, Nat, would you feel, oh, sorry, Trustee Stokebrand.
I don't think my question falls into technical, but I'll go ahead since you gave me, since I think I've been given the floor. So I guess the question to me is, how willing are we to take complaints about North Oakland Avenue paving? Because, you know, I don't really see us doing a mill and overlay before 2025. Let's be honest, what would that cost? And it would give us, you know, if we were regularly scheduled, I really favor, from just the quick look-see I've had, and I remember thinking about this before, I think we should delay North Oakland Avenue. But I grew up on a farm. My paradigm about good roads is really different than a lot of other people's paradigm about good roads, right? So when people complained about North Oakland Avenue being rough, I would be willing to say we decided it was in the best interest of the businesses, which are important, that we had to put it off. And it doesn't seem worth a mill and overlay on South Oakland is $200,000 or $300,000, right? I just want to make it clear, I don't see doing a mill and overlay on North Oakland Avenue between now. If we delay this to 2025, I don't think I can support a mill and overlay for 3 years or 4 years.
And I don't believe that
I'm willing to do patching, right?
That, just to be clear, that's not what we're suggesting.
But to your point, Trustee Stokebrand, it is very routine that we hear comments about the condition of North Oakland Avenue and the improvements that are really necessary in order to accommodate. And a primary example I will use will be the intersection of Kensington. Recommendations within this design would accommodate for improvements made to intersections like that and others to accommodate for some of the issues that people have experienced. So people will also need to understand that those will not be addressed until North Oakland is addressed from a pavement perspective, because the cost benefit of doing that type of infrastructure improvement outside of a larger project like this, I couldn't recommend it.
So I guess my ultimate question is pedestrian safety. So I'm sorry, people in cars are going to have to suffer through the potholes for a little bit, but you know, I guess my question is, if it comes down to making it safe for, you know, strollers, wheelchairs, wagons, whatever, I don't have a background in this. So Leanne, I would just defer to you. What would you say to someone if you get complaints about North Oakland Avenue before 2025, is there any way you can give us a ballpark? What would it take to be palatable for pedestrians and bikers?
I think palatable is in the eye of the beholder. If you look at it from a purely technical engineering and enforcement standpoint, the documented incidents or accidents wouldn't indicate that there's a pedestrian safety problem on North Oakland Avenue. I can certainly understand and relate to people who anecdotally might strongly disagree with that statement. But I guess my response would be those improvements are planned for 2025. And in the meantime, we will do everything we can to ensure that the signage is visible, appropriate, and that there are no safety errors, or safety issues from a pavement or infrastructure standpoint, and that all current traffic control is fully maintained.
Thank you. I could support the delay.
Thank you, Trustee Stokebrand.
So quick question, and maybe this was, oh, sorry, I should wait to be called on.
Trustee Warren, of course.
Maybe this was in the packet and I only had time to scan the additional material today, so I'm still kind of catching up. So if we mill and overlay it in 2025, when is the reconstruction then scheduled for? Does it push? I'm following up on trustee Stokelbrand's.
There's no mill and overlay. It's just a straight up reconstruction in 2025. No mill.
Oh, okay, sorry, I read too quickly. So we're totally reconstructing in 2025 as opposed to mill and overlay now. Got it.
Mill and overlay would be south Oakland, and then reconstruction is north Oakland.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was reading too quickly. That makes perfect sense then.
And if I could just be technical for the term that we're using for North Oakland, because Leanne is always helpful in reminding me, it would be considered a pavement replacement. So reconstruction in many people's minds is reconstructing all of the sidewalk and other type of amenities alongside. We would not be touching those areas. There would be some areas where curb replacement would be necessary, but that would be directly due to replacement of our water infrastructure underground that would necessitate the majority of any curb interaction. So it would really be that area between the curb lines.
Is reconstruction
Is pavement replacement.
pavement replacement? Thank you.
Thanks for asking, Kathy.
Yeah,
I welcome the opportunity to talk about it.
it is.
Trustee
confusing.
Ursing.
So I think, we had the opportunity to speak with Leanne and, President McKay and Rebecca. We all had the chance to speak about this. And I think at the top of our minds was our business community. And they've just made it through what was probably the most challenging time that they've ever had to go through as a business. So I think that was front and forefront in our minds of, can they withstand another year of this or another summer when they're about to rebound? Because our businesses are about to rebound. These restaurants, the bars, they're about to rebound, come through this summer. And couldn't we do this to them right away, again? And I think we decided that 2025 was probably the best option, but to get the perspective of the bid and the business owners, I'd love to hear it, because maybe their perspective is, let's get it all done right away, so we don't have this bump in the road 4 or 5 years down the line or 3 years down the line when we're supposed to do this. And that's not necessarily a perspective that we've necessarily had yet. So before I think we go too much farther, it'd be great for me to get their perspective from the bid and maybe from Nat, because Nat's pretty well spoken on these types of issues. So I'd love to hear from both Stephanie and Nat and to get their opinions on this issue before we maybe get too far.
Thank you, Arthur. Nat, Steph, I'll let you decide who wants to go first.
Nat, you there?
I am. I'm trying to unmute. Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay, go for it. Yep.
Sure. Let's see if my. Okay. Start my video. Or maybe not. Disabled. Anyway. Yeah. I definitely have an opinion on it, and I think it's not too hard to guess. I think Arthur's correct in saying that, a road reconstruction would be a big challenge. And obviously COVID was a big, and still is a big challenge. We're still literally discussing on a daily basis, what to do and what's the next policy. And it's almost like it just got a little more confusing. Still optimistic information, but almost more confusing as far as, what to choose as, your rules. Which does have a direct impact on literally how many customers we have and how much money you make. The funny thing for me is that we're trying to open a place in Tulsa right now, and sitting on the bid board there as well. I listened to 2 years of the Tulsa Village reconstruction project and how badly it hurt those businesses. They didn't know COVID was coming, but then COVID came right after they finished their construction. So it's the opposite way around, and they did get both. And I will say there's a very salty taste in all of their mouths for having gone through that construction thing and then getting hit with COVID. It leaves a really long-standing bitterness, I would say, which I only say that because I could see this ending up the same. Just trying to come out of this and then having to endure a year of construction would just leave people really mad. I mean, unfortunately, there's a lot of kind of, it's not really anger, but it's more like just angst about COVID that has been simmering, and people are burnt out emotionally and everything else, and definitely in their business. So adding on the burden of that, I know frustrations toward the village and anyone who's quote unquote in charge of doing that, making this decision. There would be animosity there. I just know there would. From a personal point of view, you know, my business does have a parklet right on Oakland, and you know, from a real technical point of view, you know, we're looking forward to being able to do more business this summer, which will literally mean how many people can you fit outside. And I know that's true for Cloud Red and everybody else, just staging up to get as many people kind of outside. If your neighbors allow you to squeeze in a couple more tables, that's just that much more likely you're going to do well this summer, or, you know, just get back to some level of normalcy. And obviously, even if the parklet was gone, but it was like a construction dust cloud out there, it would just destroy the ability to set up shop outside a little, which is the thing we're looking to do. So from a personal and technical standpoint, yeah, I'd be really dismayed if that outdoor situation got messed up by construction. So there's that personal side of it. But like I said, there's also the longer standing feelings that I just know would feel like a 1-2 punch that, you know, I know just people hold a grudge over that, or I would guess that might happen. Any questions for
Nat.
me?
You know, maybe a question to Steph then is, so with the 2025 then being considered as the new timeline for pavement replacement, do you think having that 3 years, I mean, obviously we need to do this, it's going to happen, and I don't think pushing it off is very smart even further, and we can't because of the TIF funding. But will that give the bid enough time to come up with you know, creative, I mean, solutions to this? Because it's going to happen, and hopefully that 3 years gives you guys enough time to plan for that to happen, Nat, knowing that it's going to eventually happen, right? I'm just, you know, do you think having that 3 years is good enough, right? But I mean, I say that, but we need to get it done, and we're under a certain deadline because of the funding.
Yeah, and I didn't mention, but I did hear Trustee Stokerbrand mention growing up on a farm, which I did as well. And I find that I would have made the exact same comment, because honestly, the idea that the road is bad never would have struck me. I live literally on the road. It's, you know, steps away from where I'm sitting right now. I use it every day, and it's never crossed my mind that there's anything wrong with it. So, you know, I'm not on the board or in charge of those decisions. But if I were, obviously, I might have a different opinion as to what a bad road is. But I understand there are a lot of other factors as to why it would need to be replaced. That notwithstanding, it would be more of a, you know, obviously we're all behind financially in ways and a little unsure. And even 1 or 2 years of normal sales would just make you feel confident in, like, yeah, okay, this summer might not be as good, but if that comes after a couple of years of normal summers, you feel confident again. But nobody feels confident right now. So, you know, that's kind of the main thing. You know, people just wonder if they're gonna get back to what things used to look like. And even if nothing changed, and in 3 or 4 years or whatever, just having 2 or 3 years of normal sales would make me feel really comfortable, because I'd probably be back in a headspace of business as usual, which I don't think anybody's in that headspace right now.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Steph?
Yeah, I think, Arthur, to your point, you know, just having a couple more years to kind of get everybody ramped up that this has to happen, it's going to happen, and that, you know, we kind of put it off as long as we could. You you know, COVID is still kind of unpredictable as we're learning when things keep changing. So I don't know that it's totally done yet. I mean, I'm trying to be optimistic about it, but you know, having a couple years of normal business and the chance to just like communicate like crazy that this is coming, I think will be really helpful for all of our businesses.
Any trustees who hasn't spoken yet have any comments or questions?
President McKay, so when will Mark then later talk to us about the financial aspects of this?
I'm hoping that we could start that part now.
Okay.
Oh, great. Let's go.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Do you want to run through the options?
I don't have the packet in front of me if you want
Oh, sure. Happy to. I just didn't want to step in front. I know how much you love talking about it.
to.
Okay, so as I mentioned to you earlier, in 2025, we were slated to do a double alley program. When we do an alley program, it's estimated about $750,000 for one program in a year. So 2025, that was going to be doubled primarily because we were missing one of our years of regular alley construction cycles due to the Southeast Sewer combined project. So option one would be to design all alleys in 2021, then awarding a construction contract that corresponds to the funds available. Selecting this option requires the board to approve an RFP to design all remaining alleys in 2021 this evening. So that's been listed on your consent agenda should you choose to exercise that option. Funding for alleys would be provided by savings or project deferral in the amount of approximately $1 million. And listed within your packet are those capital projects that we've bonded for that we've either experienced savings from or would be deferred. The alley program is typically funded, as I said, at $750,000 every other year. A total of $1.5 million was forecasted for 2025. So this would be less than the anticipated cost of a double alley program in years 2022. The other component here is the green infrastructure or GI funding. Typically, we have this funding for alleys in large part through the MMSD Green Solutions funding pool. The village has already been applying green funding to alleys in 2021 and possibly a GI project for the Hubbard Park parking lot and the police department parking lot. That in the police department parking lot, which we'll be talking about later this evening. So the village would need to evaluate when they receive the alley bids and the MMSD funding available in 2022 when deciding how to allocate between these projects. So typically, it just offsets the cost, but we'll be expending some of that. So we'll just have to consider that. But in the design process, I'm hopeful that in designing all the alleys, we can pick out some that perhaps will be less susceptible or require green infrastructure. Maybe not. Just take a look at those bidding documents come through, so we can decide how to use those funds most cost effectively. Trustee Ursink?
Just on the green infrastructure. So we're going to apply for those funds regardless, and we can use those funds towards the Hubbard Park parking lot and police parking lot. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And then we just don't know if that grant program will be available then in 2025 when we end up going through with these alleys, or are we, what's the thought there for the green infrastructure for the alleys once we get to 2025?
My understanding is that it's likely to be available, but we'd be expending much of the funds right now on other projects where we wouldn't have it available in 2022 to perhaps fund as much green infrastructure through the alley program as we would have desired.
And then, Leanne, at some point, it doesn't have to happen now. We can talk about this offline or later, or if you want to tell me now, but the impact of the green infrastructure in the parking lots as opposed to that combined sewer, because I think that was the big, element for the green infrastructure was the combined sewer areas. What's the impact of that? So are we going to see more impact with the parking lots, or would we see more impact with the combined sewer Do you know how to, can you?
Yeah,
Or the-
as we've discussed in the past, it's staff's recommendation that we focus our GI efforts in the separated sewer area,
I'm sorry.
not the
I
combined
apologize.
sewer area.
Separated. Yep, I apologize. Separated.
Yep,
sewer.
and both Hubbard and the PD are in the separated area.
Okay.
Just to clarify one of Rebecca's statements, the other, one of the things we were pointing out related to grant funding is the majority of the MMSD money that we get is a direct allocation. We are allowed to roll it over. So if we were not using it in 22, 23, and 24, which is kind of what we had initially intended in the long range financial plan implementation schedule, we would then be able to bank funds and have a very large pot of money available in 25 for a double alley program. We would not be in that position if we do the double alley program next year. And that's really the reason. It's just that we wouldn't have the time to bank and roll over all of that funding for those grant years.
Thank you.
Trustee Warren?
Yeah, just to try to keep this somewhat clean. I realize we're kind of segueing into the second phase of our discussion here on the alleys. Do we want to be clear, I support moving Oakland to 2025, but do we want to make clear that we support that option before moving to alleys? Because alleys, it gets kind of immaterial if we don't have a board consensus on 2025. I think I'm hearing a very strong consensus to move, but do we want to do that first so we're clean on that and then proceed to the alley discussion?
Appreciated. I think we got off on this because of we have to consider some funding model options. Is that correct, Mark?
Well, only if you defer Oakland Avenue.
Oh, okay.
You know, if you're trying to move up the alley program, that's where some fiscal constraints might come into play. Again, you know, the concept of a double alley program came out of the long range plan as kind of a barter arrangement for, you know, not being able to do an alley program in 23. But even with the funding available, it would still be significantly more than our typical alley program, but not quite enough money to do double. And that's where the options come in.
Mm-hmm. But that item is agended on our business meeting later this evening, correct?
I don't know what you're referring to.
There's a conversation, there's an agenda item. To Trustee Warren's point, we're just trying to keep the conversation as clear as possible and as clean and not get into anything that's agended for later this evening. I'm not sure that we have done that, but I just wanted to know, is there more information that needs to be presented to us before we give staff direction?
Yeah, I think Trustee Warren was correct. It's kind of a two-step process. If you collectively feel that it's beneficial to the community to switch the alley program with the North Oakland pavement reconstruction or pavement replacement program, that's one guidance. And then the follow-up to that is, you know, what is your guidance on the funding and scope of that alley program, which is what we were starting to get into.
Got it. Okay. Trustee Warren?
Oh, no, I mean, that makes sense. I was just, my only argument is, look, maybe we should just say, take a straw, I don't know if it's a straw poll or a motion for Oakland, get that off the table and then take up the alley program. Just trying to be efficient here.
Thank you.
Maybe I'm overdoing it, but.
No, you're not. I would, yeah, if we could just take a read from the village board, do you feel prepared to give guidance to staff around the option of moving North Oakland pavement replacement to 2025?
I do.
Yeah, should we do a thumbs up, thumbs down?
I think Trustee Zuckerbrand's had something to say here before.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Sorry, I can't see everybody on the Zoom, so I appreciate the teamwork here. Trustee Stokebrand?
So I guess to me, I think we all would generally approve this, but I need to know how big is the cost. So we are giving up this green infrastructure. If I'm understanding this correctly, we're giving up apologies if I don't find it, how much in green infrastructure money are we giving up that we can't get back, right? Is that the deal? This.
No, we are not giving up any money. We will still continue to receive those allocated funds. The issue is that those funds will then be banked. We won't be able to use them on the alley project because we have not yet earned them. We will have to apply them to a different project or an alley project beyond 2025. The thing that we wanted to raise related to those funds is that in the past, we have used the MMSD green infrastructure solutions or green solutions funding to offset GI in alleys. Because we're changing the schedule here, we do not have the opportunity to bank funding from 22, 23, 24, and 25 to apply to the 25 program. We can still do green infrastructure in 2022. We will simply not have as large a pot of MMSD money to draw on. And if the village wishes to install green infrastructure, it may have to self-fund it.
And
And that
so
might be the parking lot.
is there a dollar amount on that?
No, we do not know that because we haven't engineered anything yet.
So we have no idea how much we'd be losing.
We're not losing anything.
Or what's the verb you want? We have no idea how much.
We're going to apply for the money and we're just going to allocate it into like the parking lot at Hubbard or potentially the police department parking lot. So we're applying for a certain amount of money that we will probably receive. We've just got to figure out a different way to spend that money within the community as opposed to these alleys because they're not going to be prepared. It's not going to be ready for that, for the funding at that time. We won't, so we'll have to figure out different ways to spend the Green Solutions grant. Is that right, Leanne?
That's correct. We actually don't even have to apply for these funds. They're an automatic annual allocation, but you cannot expend them prior to the year. We can't spend 22 funds because it's not 22 and we haven't been granted them yet.
Okay.
Does that
All right,
help, Kathy?
I think I've got that. Thank you.
The way that I'm interpreting it is that we wouldn't be able to do less green infrastructure on the alley program in 2022. It's just that if we have $1 million budgeted to spend, we might end up doing less alley footage. That $1 million might not go as far as the double program that we are.
No.
No?
No. So we have, I believe it's a total of 13 alleys that had been earmarked for reconstruction in 2025. We will design all of those alleys, assuming we move along this path for reconstruction in 2022. During any type of engineering design, we do an evaluation of whether green infrastructure is appropriate and cost effective in particular locations. We will still do that work. So when we come back to the board with a scope for proceeding to bidding the project, we will have the same discussion we had on the 21 project and on the 19 project, saying these are the alleys that are candidates for green infrastructure. This is what we estimate that incremental cost will be. And in the past, we've said, and we have this much MMSD funds to completely offset or partially offset that incremental cost. We will still have that exact same conversation. The difference in 2022 may be that the MMSD, the currently banked MMSD funds may not be enough to completely cover that GI incremental cost. At that point, the board can then decide to not install all of the identified green infrastructure, or the board can have discussions about funding it through an alternate source, self-funding, if you will. That is the only point in the process that will differ.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions on the part of the board? Okay, can we have a kind of show of interest or non-interest in moving this to 2025? Okay, so I see 2, 3. I'm looking, oh, Arthur, trustee Backhorst, Arndorfer, Stokebrand. Okay, we have all thumbs up. So that is the direction to move the North Oakland pavement replacement project scheduled to 2025. Is there any other guidance that you need from us during this portion of the meeting this evening?
Are we going to talk about funding of the 2022? Okay.
Okay, would you like to, so we are going to discuss that now.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I remember reading someplace in the packet and it was like later, but it must have been the RFP under consent agenda or something like that. So in terms of funding, pose to us what the question is.
So 2 options to keep it relatively simple. We've already bonded for our projects.
Mhm.
So we typically don't make these types of large changes at this time because bonding costs money. So we like to pool and only do it at concerted times in the cycle. So what we did is we went through the projects that we have bonded for and identified where we've experienced some savings because things came in under budget or items that could be potentially deferred. And so there's a list in there that is estimated right now at about $1 million or 1.3 million. So one option could be utilizing those estimated funds to then take them and fund an alley program in 2022. Typically a double alley program would have been 1.5 million. So this would decrease that available funding. Again, recognizing that this 1.3 million is based on estimates of projects at this time. Second option would be to potentially bond for some additional funds and our bonding that's coming up for the AMI project and water infrastructure projects. And adding some funds to that amount in order to increase the total dollar available to perform alley projects in 2022. So it doesn't require us to go out in a completely separate bonding, which is what we'd not recommend because of the cost, but we would lump it in to one that we were actually going to bring to you tonight. We deferred on it until the next meeting. So we could allow you this one meeting to kind of make that decision.
Mm-hmm. And so to be clear, we would have bonded for this amount of work in 2025.
Mm-hmm.
We're just doing it sooner, and we have some savings, bond savings that can be applied towards it. And then for the remainder, we could lump it in with the AMI bond sales that are coming up.
If you wanted to allocate more than the estimate amount of funding available.
So,
Question, Trustee Warren, was that you?
so just trying to simplify. So our 2 options here are design everything and only purchase or do the construction that we can afford based on our savings, or design everything and do everything with additional bonding. So it's either just use what we save by not doing other stuff, or do everything and bond some more. Is that those are the 2 roads? Okay.
So could I hear from the board what your preferences are or questions?
Trustee Stokebrand has her hand up.
Okay, thank you, Kathy.
And so with option 1, we would sit and look at we would take a recommendation from the DPW to decide who makes the cut for 2022 and who doesn't.
Correct. There would likely be a recommendation, or we could go through that process together.
Okay, so some people who have waited for a new alley will be left. And what would the next year be then? 2027?
Well, that is all contingent on bids, which is always the big X factor. We're
Right.
reasonably close to a double alley concept, but we just don't know what the bids will come in at. So, the option 1 is, depending on bids, we may have to scale to suit the funds that are available. Option 2 is we're gonna beef up, and then no matter what the bids come in at, you know, we're gonna get some extra money so we can do it all.
Okay, so one thing to say, we have to look at the construction environment, right? And so I'd look for guidance from Leanne on that. If we decide to do more, can we get this done? And the other question is the interest rates, right? So from the bonding perspective, now is a good time, yet interest rates are going up, but they're not. What do you think about that, Mark? Get out your glass ball, get out your crystal ball, right?
I will defer to the will of the board there. You know, it's a fair point, but you know, as a finance director, I don't like having over $1 million of excess funds available after we've completed our projects. I don't think that's fiscally prudent. But we don't know what the bids are going to be on a lot of these projects, and we can't come up short. That's also not fiscally prudent. So I think there's a real opportunity that we've had a good cycle for bids. There's been some projects that are going to need to hold off for further evaluation. And we've changed some scope with the upcoming Southeast Sewer projects. All that gave us a position here where we've got up to maybe about $1.3 million that we could apply to what has always been framed as a double alley project. So again, the will of the board, if the board doesn't feel comfortable paring down what might be a bid in excess of the money that's available, then that's option 2. If we're willing to see what shakes out and realize that we're going to have a lot more winners than we are losers in this, because we're moving a 2025 program up to 2022.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's a horse a piece there. So just looking for the guidance on how the board feels about that.
And so my final question would be, where it says the board should specify dollar amount with a blank. If it looks like we have I think you said 1.3 and the estimate is 1.5, are you looking for a $200,000 in additional funds to be allocated for the double alley program? Is that the number we need here, or?
Well, that's, again, it's all conceptual based on engineering and actual contract bids. You know, the number could come in at 1.8 for construction, but then there's green infrastructure, right? We're accelerating our green infrastructure implementation on alleys by 3 years. So that's 3 years of MMSD funding that was going to potentially be available to us in 2025 that we haven't earned yet. So the question is what magnitude of alley green infrastructure can be accomplished with the funds available, which is another fabulous question that nobody has any answers to until after you do the engineering. So,
so I guess what's the staff recommendation for the blank line?
staff doesn't have a recommendation. It's really very subjective.
But
You know, if green
I guess-
infrastructure, I'm sorry, just President McCall, but if green infrastructure could come in at, you know, $500,000, if that's ultimately the will of the board, it could come in at $500,000 and maybe you're only going to do 4 out of 5 segments to get within budget. It could come in, we just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the challenge, but there is an opportunity if the board wants to borrow additional money to piggyback that on the upcoming water utility borrowing to save some money. Obviously, we're speculative in a certain regard to this one item, but what we don't spend, we'll spend down the road. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Go ahead, Wesley.
But I guess my lean here is just to go out to bid and just spend what we have left over, what we've saved. It just seems to me like first of all, we might be able to hit our target there, and maybe the bids come in better than we thought, and we were able to get through the entire program. But I just, especially with, and I realize the two are a little bit different. So bear with me, but especially in light of our conversation that's going to take place about budgetary challenges, I just think that, it feels better to me to kind of stay within what we have while doing this project. And I mean, the downside might be there might be an alley or two or even three that we have to push off, but it just seems like that just feels better to me right now in terms of how we kind of manage what we're doing in this switch.
Yeah, I agree with Trustee Warren on that.
Other comments from trustees? Am I missing anyone?
I have one more thing so the other thing we could do is if we didn't take issue any more bonds for this and we went with the 1.3 that we think we have and hope it comes up short or hope it comes up to be enough. If I understand this correctly, we could decide not to do green infrastructure and that would save money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what's on the table here. If you're looking for, not that it's necessarily binary, but if you're looking for the choices we're making here today, it's put off Oakland Avenue North of Capitol and possibly to keep the cost with what we've got already sitting here with the money we have from leftover from other projects. If we decide we want to keep it within the numbers, we would possibly give up on some green infrastructure, just to be clear.
And if I just would caveat that, that's only if the board's preference was to insist that all alleys under scope would be constructed before they evaluated green infrastructure, because there's a triangle to that. So.
Thank you.
Since we are coming up on time, I'd like to just see kind of the interest for option 1, and then I'll ask interest for option 2, and that'll just give us a sense of where the board's at. So, and I was flipping between screens. So option 1.
What do you use? Do you use a laptop or an iPad or a phone for the meetings?
I'm going to go for a TA session another time. Okay, option 1, I see Trustee Warren, I see Arndorfer, I see Stokebrand, I see Baldoff, I see Ursink, I see Bockhorst, and President McCaig comes in. All right, so option 1 is the direction.
Great. Thank you so much. That was the direction that we needed in order to proceed.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone. I guess I would like to, I'd like a motion to adjourn so we have about 6 minutes in between meetings, if possible.
Second.
Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you, everyone. See you at 7:30.